see just how y'all are feeling tonight and what kind of mood you're in. So I know that we practiced it once already. So I don't know if, Jerry, if we have to clear that poll out first before you can relaunch it, but you can relaunch that first poll if you want.
Okay, let's see if I can relaunch it here. Here is poll number 1 and relaunch. Okay, there it goes.
Yay. So you should see the questions on there. So I'm just asking, how are you feeling tonight? Are you buzzing with excitement? Are you sleepy as a snail, relaxed as a calm breeze, or happy as the sunshine? So you can pick one, and it's anonymous, so you don't have to worry about me seeing what you pick. How's our results looking?
Oh, we have 24 of 25 voted.
Yay.
So we'll end the poll
Sure.
and we'll share the results.
Ooh. So most of us are relaxed as a calm breeze. Maybe it's the weather. When I was getting ready to speak tonight, I looked out and I was like, oh, I'm kind of glad it's like rainy and not beautiful sunshine, because none y'all would be out in your yards, hopefully. So I'm glad everyone's relaxed and ready to join in tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. So let me get that up and go in. I think I'm on this here. There we go. Can everybody see that? And then again, if you're, I know, I'm assuming everyone's used Zoom before, but you can always change your view of the gallery of folks that you can see, scoot it over to the side or something so that you can see the slides a little bit better. So you can adjust that up where it says view or move it over with your cursor. But so I'm going to share tonight about how to make your yard more pollinator friendly. So the cool thing about this topic is that we're super on trend. It's trending right now. It's a very something that a lot of folks are wanting to learn more about. So I'm going to share some tips that I personally use, and I know that other folks have had success with, and hopefully answer some of your questions this evening. But so my job is the supervisor at the Farmington Hills Nature Center. So I'm kind of wearing two hats this evening, coming from a background of environmental education, like Garrett said, working with the public, sharing my love of nature and connecting folks to the natural world has always been, a passion of mine. It's a goal with my work. And then also, caring for the land and healing the land, whether it's my own property or the land at Heritage Park. And so taking care of it as best I can and really maintaining that land ethic. Those of you that are familiar with Aldo Leopold might remember that, having a good ethic for the land and caring for it. So we're going to be going over some of that this evening. Oops. Go to my next slide. Oh, there we go. So some of the questions that we'll answer together tonight is, what is a pollinator? Hopefully most of you know, but I want to make sure, so that'll be easy. And then why do we care? You guys are all part of Sierra Club, so I'm hoping you already care, but we'll make sure we know why we care. And then what the problem is and how you all can be part of the solution, how you can take action, because that's the most important. We can talk about it and I can preach to the choir. I'm assuming you're all part of that choir, but we want to figure out how we can be part of the solution. So first off, what is a pollinator? Again, I think you all know, but I have another fun poll to see what you think a pollinator is. So we're going to launch the poll number 2, and you can fill in for this poll. You can answer more than one choice. So check all that apply once the poll comes up.
Okay, let's see if I can get the second poll. Poll 2, launch.
Yay.
Nice, Jerry.
Good job. This is
Thank
poll
you.
expert already. So you can go ahead and everyone, you can check all that apply. And then submit your answers. And don't worry, I made all these polls very easy, so there's no pressure. Hopefully you all know the answers before we even take them, but it's just something for fun and to make sure you're all still awake and engaged.
Okay, we've got 25 of 28. Anybody else? Last call.
Last
26.
call.
Okay, end poll and share results.
Yay. Okay, so we're going to see our results here. It looks like all of you are in agreement that butterflies are pollinators, and that's right. They are very important pollinators. Some of you think bats are pollinators too. Most of you wasps, even though some of us might think wasps are pesty and, you know, don't want to be stung. They are important pollinators. Birds are super important. And us humans, we're also pollinators too. I know that sounds crazy because we don't often think about all the impacts that we have on the land, but we can pollinate as well, whether it's, you know, manually pollinating plants. We do that a lot with agriculture, or, you know, on accident where we're just dispersing pollen throughout, you know, the plants that we're walking in and that kind of thing. So we can close that poll. When you're ready, you can end sharing for that. And then, yay, ta-da. So here's some of our pollinators. So the wind can pollinate too. So that's another interesting thing. But a lot of us think about bees when we think of pollinators. And so a lot of like data and things that is collected regarding pollinators has to do specifically for bees. But I think it's important to understand that there's a lot more animals out there that are pollinators. Really any animal that causes plants to make fruit or seed. And they can do this by moving pollen around from one part of the plant to the other, the male part to the female part. So a lot of different animals can be pollinators. And you can kind of see the animals on the screen have they're full of pollen, moving it from one plant to the next. So why do we care about them? Is it just because they're so cute? Like this guy right here, look at him. He's all fuzzy and he looks like you just want to cuddle with him. He's the cutest little bee. So a lot of pollinators I think are cute, but some people might not think that. But why else should we care about them? So we're going to explore a little bit of that right now. So our food supply depends on pollinators. So as I mentioned before, a lot of the data is collected about pollinators refers to bees specifically. So 100 crops provide 90% of the world's food. So just 100 different types of crops. That's not very many when you consider all the different plants out there in the world. Some of us might even just grow 100 plants in our garden, different species, our home gardens. But 71 of those are pollinated by just bees. So imagine all the other pollinators out there too. So they're very reliant. Our food source relies on pollinators, definitely. We also, I love this poster. I know you can't really read what it says, so don't worry about reading all the words on there. But I just love how it shows these beautiful wildflowers that you can find in many natural areas and even in your own backyard, and the different uses they have. So not just our food, but also our different products that we use, whether it's fiber, soap, wax for candles, and especially medicine. So we use them we rely on plants for our medicine a lot of times. So we kind of think of medicine as the synthetic thing that just you go to the pharmacy and get. And that sometimes is the case, but a lot of times the ingredients in that comes from plants. So pollinators are important for that. And then we care about them because they clean our water, air, and soil. So this is actually the Rouge River in Heritage Park. The upper branch of the Rouge River flows through Heritage Park. So that's the watershed that I'm in. That's my watershed address. Hopefully you know your watershed address. It's important to understand where all of the water that runs off the land goes to. But those plants that the pollinators, make sure that they stay healthy, that they continue to grow, and the seeds and berries spread, are responsible for cleaning our water, air, and soil. And then hopefully what you notice in this picture is these folks are doing a bug hunt with Friends of the Rouge. So they're collecting macroinvertebrates in the creek. So a lot of insects begin their life cycle in the water. For example, dragonflies. So we think of dragonflies as just flying around out and about, but they spend a large portion of their life in the water as aquatic insects. And so they play a huge role in filtering water, providing food for wildlife, and helping to clean our air, water, and soil. So what is the problem? So before we go to, I have one other fun little poll to just see what you guys think about why we care about pollinators. But before we go into that, this is just a map focusing on bees. Again, a lot of the data focuses on bees right now, and farmland specifically. So you can see in Michigan, a few of the areas that are dark red or are the darker purple are problem areas where bee abundance has really dropped on cropland specifically. But what I wanted to mention is that almost 86% of land is privately owned east of the Mississippi. So that means that we're talking about private land, not parkland, not government land that's managed by nature preserves, anything like that. We're talking about your backyard. So that's why it's important not to just think of natural areas as places where you go to visit, like a park or a farm that you drive by or something like that. It's your backyard. That's important to remember. And when we talked about Yosemite as a national park, we really want to consider our neighborhoods and our yards as part of that, part of nature, and creating, if we can convert our yards to be more pollinator friendly, we can make a national park right in our own neighborhood. So it's really awesome. So before we move on to what is the problem and exploring that just a little bit more, we have another fun poll to make sure you're still with us and why we care about pollinators. So you can put up the third poll. So why do we care about them? And you can check all that apply.
Okay, we've got 26 of 31. We're getting there.
You guys are fast with these polls. I'm impressed.
Okay, going, or is it 1, 2, 3? End poll. Thank you. And share results.
Yay. So all of these things matter. So you really couldn't answer wrong. So the pressure was off in that regard. But they keep our air, land, and water clean. They provide food, medicine, and plus they are cute, which we can't forget. Okay, so we can close that one. Go to the next slide here. So what is the problem? So this might be what you look out and see in your front yard. So, or if it's not your yard, maybe that's what your neighbor's yard looks like, or the majority of yards in your neighborhood. And so this looks very clean and right. We kind of look at it, look how nicely manicured their grass is. And I love the like lone pine cone right here, this little, this like sad little pine cone that's like hanging on for dear life over here in the corner. So this is an typical American lawn where you have this turf grass that's not native. You have these boxwood shrubs, and probably burning bush back here or something, and some likely non-native ground cover. So this is not what pollinators want. This doesn't really have any food source for them. It has nowhere for them to complete their life cycle. And so what they're looking for is something more like this. So what a lot of us really don't see in our neighborhoods, right? So if you're somebody that is already passionate about native plants, maybe you have an area of your yard that looks like this, but if your neighborhood looks like mine, majority of the yards don't have this. So this is what we want to work towards and what we want to do to try to make our yards more pollinator friendly. And so we're back to the problem here, and we want to explore this a little bit deeper because there are a lot of problems here besides just the fact that there's a lack of biodiversity of food sources and sheltering sources and places where a pollinator can complete its life cycle. We also use 8 billion gallons of water daily to water our lawns. That's a lot of water. And so when we're considering that there's places even in this country that folks have lack of access to clean drinking water, and we're deciding to water our lawns with that much water, that's like mind boggling. So this turf grass takes a lot of water. 30% of summer water usage goes to lawns. That's the east side of the country. And so when you're talking that on the west side of the country in the summertime, 60% of irrigation water goes to lawns, which is just crazy. Like, because you don't, considering that this is a choice that we're making, you know, to have these lawns like this. This is not natural environment. 40% of chemicals that we use on our lawns here in the United States are banned in other countries because either they're carcinogenic or they cause other adverse health problems. So that says a lot too, that here in the US, because we value this pristine lawn so much, that we risk our health, you know, the health of our kids and the health of our pets. And, you know, there's a lot of studies that show different diseases like lymphoma are directly linked to pesticides and herbicides that we use on our lawns. 3 billion lawn maintenance hours every year. 3 billion collectively. We spend 3 billion hours collectively caring for this lawn, this kind of lawn. There's just so many other fun things you could be doing, just like sitting on your back porch sipping lemonade or something like that. So just the human manpower that goes into lawn care is incredible. And up to 60% of fertilizers that we put on our lawn, so think about all the fertilizer that's used to keep this lawn green, ultimately ends up in ground and surface water. So that picture I showed before of the Rouge River, all of that's washing right into there, affecting our pollinators because they spend a lot of their life cycle in the water. And so this also contributes greatly to climate change. As I mentioned before, climate change is really linked to a lot of different things together. It's not just one cause of, you know, climate change, but the ability for this type of lawn to capture and hold carbon is much lower than that of like our native plants and large trees. So a large tree like an oak tree, which we'll talk about in a minute, is going to be much more effective at helping climate change, than this lawn. So another problem, we've all seen this, right, when we're driving around. This is what our farm fields look like. So a couple things of note here, but one main thing that you'll notice right away is that it's all the same kind of plant. So is this the kind of thing that we see when we walk out in nature? No, we see all different kinds. There's a lot of biodiversity, but for some reason when we farm, we go with this monoculture because for us, we think that it's easier to care for because it's all the same kind of plant. But what you'll notice is there's this vicious cycle of chemical and fertilizer application to continue to keep this monoculture going. And if you've ever driven by a field that's like fallow, that's not being planted that year, you don't see there's almost nothing green in it because there's no nutrients in that soil that we have to put them there in order to grow these plants. So there's a huge movement now too to make farms that are more like this, where there's a variety of plants growing. You can have mass, large scale agriculture and still have biodiversity. And then you can also rotate your fields and plant different crops in there to help repair the soil and keep the nutrients up and the microbes healthy in that soil between plantings. So we're hopefully, moving in this direction. And this could be a whole presentation in and of itself, but I just wanted to touch on that quickly. So how can we be part of the solution? So again, cute pollinator alert, there's a hummingbird right there. She wants to know too, that's the female hummingbird, how we can help her. So a lot of you might put sugar water out for the hummingbirds, which is great. But that's not necessarily part of a solution to what she really wants. She really wants those flowers, those nectarine plants that she can find nectar at and then help pollinate. So a couple of things that you can do to be part of the solution. Hopefully this is obvious to everyone, but stop the spray. No, this poor little dandelion down here says, help me, don't spray me. So if any of you are like my daughter, her favorite flower is dandelion and she'll see it from a mile away and need to go check it out. But dandelion in a lot of people's eyes is a weed, but it's a very beneficial pollinator plant to bees and other pollinators early in the season. Because if you look around, there's not a lot of things flowering in nature early on in the spring. There's some trees, definitely a lot of flowering trees, but not a lot of these herbaceous plants. And so dandelions are one of those that are really beneficial to pollinators. So embrace the dandelions on your yard. It's okay. You will be okay. So leave them there. And there's other ways that you can stop the spray too, whether it's spraying herbicides to kill plants or pesticides to kill those pollinators that you feel like are affecting your plants. And we'll talk about some alternate solutions if you just really are not wanting weeds and what you can do to help that, especially if they're invasive weeds. And we'll talk about that too. But I love this sign. And I'm like in the works of trying to make one for my yard. But if something is not eating your plants, then your garden is not part of the ecosystem. So a lot of us think if our plants are getting munched, that's bad, that, oh, I have to destroy everything that wants to munch my plants. If you look at a pesticide and has all the list of the things that it kills, I mean, there's hundreds of insects it's killing. It can't just target one kind of insect. So even if you think you're going after this one insect with herbicide, in reality, you're killing everything. So you might think you're spraying for mosquitoes. You are, but in reality, you're really killing butterflies, bees, moths, all kinds of other insects that are out there in your habitat. So things eating your plants is okay. That means you're part of the natural ecosystem. Another way that you can be part of the solution, and I think is really fun because there's some really fun ways that you can help. And this is not me here, but it might as well be me because I have my own flame weeder that I like to go out and light things on fire with when I'm working on my pollinator area. But flame weeders are a great alternative to those of you that like to make sure that your driveway is free of weeds and that your garden beds are, don't have any stray plants coming up in them or anything like that, without spraying herbicides and without feeling like you have to manually pull all those weeds out, because that can be tiring. But who doesn't like lighting things on fire? I know I do. So flame weeders, you can get them online, and then you would hook them up to any propane tank. You can even do mini tanks or full-size tanks that you would use like for your barbecue grill. You can order this little dolly with it if you don't want to have to lug it around because they're kind of heavy. And then you get this little like long extended torch, and it kind of looks like a pesticide or herbicide applicator, but instead of spray coming out, you have just a little bit of flame. And you go around and you just target your weeds with that, and it heat shocks them down to the roots and kills them. You don't want to burn them to ash. It doesn't kill them instantly, but after you flame weed them, after a day or two, they do die. And it works really well on things like thistle and some of those more pesky weeds that herbicides sometimes don't even work on. So the only thing to watch out for this is obviously safety concerns. You want to make sure that you always have like a little watering can with you or something in case you get a dry spot and the fire kind of spreads a little. That happens sometimes in my prairie. So I always make sure I keep a water source nearby and wear closed-toed shoes. But otherwise, it's pretty fun to light things on fire. Another way that you can reduce the weeds on your property or prepare an area for native planting. So if you want to get rid of your turf grass, which we talked about is not very beneficial, you can do something called solarization. So I've done this on my property. We actually have a solarization project happening right now at Heritage Park, if you want to see one in progress. But this is just clear. This looks like they just used a shower curtain or something, which is awesome. But it's just clear tarp, and you lay it down and make sure it's secure with either landscape staples or bricks or rocks. And it needs to be down for a few weeks, like 6 to 8 weeks, depending on how much sunlight it gets and the time of year you put it down, to kill that area. And then you can plant in there and do whatever else you want. I really like this method because it, instead of just spraying your grass and killing it, this kills everything, so you can get a fresh start. So you don't have a lot of those weeds coming up later, like things like creeping Charlie and thistle and things that you can find in your lawn. This is really going to give you a fresh start and help prepare the soil for native planting, whether you're doing plugs or you're doing seed. It's really great to use if you're seeding an area too. And it's really low cost. Just takes a little bit of patience. And sometimes it can be really fast, like 3 weeks if it gets a lot of sun and it's super hot. Another part of a way that you can be part of the solution is making sure you're checking your property for invasive plants. So again, that could be a whole talk, invasive plants, right? Going over all the invasive plants in Michigan. This is purple loosestrife. I love showing this one because it's so pretty and oh, look at this pretty purple flower. I was just talking to a gentleman last week that said he had this all over in his backyard and he loved how beautiful it was and had no idea that it was non-native invasive plant. So that's an important thing to remember, is just to check your yard for these non-native invasives and kind of keep up on what invasives are in Michigan, because invasive plants can be just as damaging as having all a turf grass lawn or, having no plants. It can actually be worse. And And then another plant that I just drives me crazy is Bradford pears. So these have been planted in neighborhoods all over Michigan as like an ornamental neighborhood tree. They have white flowers right now. They're probably just finishing with their flowering. But they're the next, for those of you that are familiar with invasive plants, like they're the next buckthorn out there. So they're creeping into our natural habitats. And definitely you can, even if you're driving down 696, you can see it in the natural areas all over there. And it really sticks out this time of year because you can see the white flowers. So we need to make sure that we're not planting that at our properties. And I have some alternatives of different trees that you can plant instead of this that have the white flowers if that's something that you like. But if you have this on your property, I'm sorry. I had one in my backyard when I first moved in that I took out. But there's things that you can replace it with. So those simple ways that you can be part of the solution, even if you're just taking the invasive plants out of your yard, that'll help with climate change and naturalization of your plants as well. Just 1 second, I'm sorry. Thank you. Sorry, y'all. My daughter just came in with the cat. Wanted to be part of our meeting. Sorry about that. So another easy thing you can do, even if you don't do anything else, even if you just turn your lights off. So a lot of us have these bright lights on our front porches or really bright spotlights in our backyards. I know a lot of my neighborhood does. We don't have really much in the way of street lights. So a lot of people have really bright spotlights in their backyards that are on all the time. This can really disrupt pollinators, especially nocturnal pollinators like bats and moths. They're attracted to these lights and it can really affect their life cycle and their ability to find food and find proper habitat. So even if you just change your lights to motion lights, so they only came on, like if you're still worried about not having lights for security reasons, switching them all to motion lights so they're just not on all the time. Or a light like this person has on their back shed, even putting a kind of cover over the top of it so the light points down to the ground and not out to the entire backyard. That also helps too. So this is a really simple thing that you can do. And the best option obviously is just turning the lights off and not just leaving them on all the time. I'm sure a lot of you know neighbors that have their lights on all the time. And then I'm giving you permission to be lazy. You can leave your leaves, leave them for wildlife. So a lot of us, put a lot of work in the fall, raking all our leaves up, making sure that we're bagging them up, getting them out into the curb or whatever, or even mulching them into the grass. So a lot of time people think, oh, I just roll over them with the lawnmower and mulch them into the grass, and that's great. However, the pollinators, like moths, for example, when they make their cocoon, they need a spot to have their cocoon underneath a layer of leaf litter so they can overwinter. So even if you can't leave your leaves throughout your entire yard, let's say you have a huge tree and it just drops a ton of leaves and it's like thick and you're just like, I don't want to leave all the leaves. Even if you just move your leaves to a more wild area of your yard and leave them there for a safe haven for those types of pollinators. It's also a great place in the spring for birds and things as a food source when all of those insects are emerging from their cocoons and things. It's a good spot for them to find food and nesting material. So I always tell folks, even if you have a really small yard, to try to find a place in your yard that you can designate as your wild area. So it can be really small, but it's just a place where you maybe put like your sticks that you pick up, your leaves, things like that. Or even just for me in my wild area, I put our old Christmas trees. I keep all of our old Christmas trees and they're back there and I either use them for firewood as needed or they're in my wild area. So again, permission to be lazy, chilling out on your spring yard cleanup as well. So a lot of people get really motivated when the weather gets nice to get out there and clean out their garden beds and pull all their weeds and mow their grass and leaf blow everything and weed whack all the things. So if you just chill out in the spring, especially early spring, like this year, we had a very early spring where it was really warm early on in the season. Everyone got really excited to get out there and work. Making sure that you wait on that, especially waiting on it until temperatures are consistently above 50 degrees during the day and in the evening. And so this year it was really warm really early. But you try to wait as long as you can to give time for those insects to emerge, especially the ones that have overwintered. And I kind of give it, if you're kind of questioning it, when to get started, I usually tell people wait until you see a lot of flying insects around. That means that they've come out of, whatever, if they've emerged as a larval state or they came out as a flying insect, that kind of gives you permission to now know that you can start doing your spring cleanup. And then again, more permission to be lazy. We can cut down on those, 3 billion or collective hours of yard work that we do every year as Americans. So we can create no mow zones on our property, even if it's a small area or strip of land that you don't mow. Again, that's going to, just from a standpoint of climate change, the emissions that you might, this little lawnmower here in the picture. And then also, this is a particular spot where a no mow zone is great along a creek bed. Again, we were talking about that water, that runoff from the land. If a lot of pesticides and fertilizers are running off, hopefully these plants here would be able to filter all that before it gets into our waterways. And then if you're not keen on setting aside a part of your yard that you don't mow at all, maybe you just select a time of year not to mow. So no mow May. If you want to join the movement of no mow May, during the whole month of May, not mowing your yard. So I would love for my city to eventually get to this point, but there's a few cities across the country that have started allowing their residents to opt into this no mow May, and they get a sign for their yard so they can let their neighbors know that I'm not just being lazy, I'm purposely not mowing my lawn for the whole month of May to really help with our pollinators. Again, they're still emerging, from their overwintering, they're returning, they're looking for plants to collect nectar from and helping to pollinate. So, not mowing for the month of May is actually a really key time. So you can join that movement if you want. And then how can we be part of the solution again with our mowing? So if you're really concerned, like, I don't know if I can do that no mow May, or if I can have, areas in my yard where I don't mow, I just think it'll look really bad. This is another option here, is replacing your non-native turf with more eco-friendly eco-turf grass mix. Michigan Wildflower Farm is a really great resource that I use almost exclusively for my seeds at Heritage Park and in my property, but they have a seed mix called eco-turf grass that you can use. It's very slow growing, stays relatively short, and is actually fairly drought resistant. So you don't have to water it, your irrigation, you don't have to waste all that water that we talked about. It's not completely native grasses. There are some non-natives like fescues in there, but it's a really great alternative if you're trying to get to that point where you're not mowing as much. And then we want to make sure we're choosing native plants whenever we possibly can. This is a list of just a few of my favorites. And I forgot to mention this in the beginning of the presentation, but at some point, maybe towards the end, I'm going to go ahead and I'll throw the link to this presentation in the chat. There's like a Google Drive and you can see it. And then at the end, I'll have all my resources that I've used, and you can click on those and get more information about all the things I've talked about. But so I'll have some resources in there of places that you can find native plants. And these are just some of my favorites that I'll talk about in a minute, but wherever possible, choosing Michigan native plants, not necessarily like cultivars, like even just because you find a coneflower at Home Depot doesn't necessarily mean that's a native plant. So make sure you do your homework on the plants that you're purchasing for your property if you really want to truly help the pollinators. And then also we were talking about this, those of you that joined the call straight away and you kind of came in at the end of that conversation, a little goes a long way. So don't feel like you need to transform your entire property in order to help out pollinators. Again, even just doing one of those things that I mentioned earlier is going to make a difference. So when you're planting native plants, don't feel like you have to completely transform all of your beds. Add a little bit at a time. As you go. And then if you don't have a yard and you don't have a lot of space, let's say you have a balcony or a small outdoor area, you can also, a lot of these perennial native plants can be grown in containers. So I have a great link at the end of this presentation, giving you tips on how to grow perennials in containers. So these plants here, bee balm, black-eyed Susan, daisies, mountain mint, looks like wild sunflower. These are all great native plants that help pollinators that can be grown in containers. So that's and then another thing I wanted to mention too, if you do live in an apartment or something like that, pay attention to how they treat the land and the lawn care that they do, and possibly offer up solutions to your apartment complex or homeowners association in ways that they can maybe not mow certain areas, or possibly reduce their use of herbicides and pesticides. It doesn't hurt to have that conversation, because sometimes people just don't know. They don't want to be hurting the land or doing something that's bad for our health. They just don't know what's anything better. So it's good to share information with people and see what solutions you can come up with. And you can go wild if you want. You can just go crazy. So all those solutions that I gave you were pretty easy. This one is like when you really want to just be like, I'm doing it, I'm going to go wild. So this is my backyard. And so you can kind of see here, I like this picture because it shows a couple things, and hopefully you can see my little cursor here. But one of the things I wanted to point out, this is my neighbor's yard. So you can see my neighbors like, nope, not doing the go wild thing. But they are fully appreciative of like my wild garden back here, and I have a good relationship with them. So that's good. I haven't converted them quite yet, but maybe one day. So you can see my little national wildlife. It's like buried in the tall grass here, but I have a couple of these certified wildlife habitat backyard signs again, so that folks know that I'm doing it on purpose and not just letting things go wild because I don't feel like doing anything. And then you can see here, I have a little bit of mowed grass because I have kids and this is their pool and they want to run around and play. And then I still have this balance over here on the side where I, have some more manicured beds. So you can definitely have the best of both worlds and have a little bit of everything on there. And I just wanted to show, just for some context, this was my yard when I first moved in. So if you remember in that last picture, the arbor there, to kind of give you some perspective, there is a small creek in the back and it floods seasonally. So this was always an issue with erosion. My neighbors had said that they had lost about 30% of their backyard, and they lose about since they had moved in, just because of stream bank erosion here. So I wanted to be able to solve that. Plus, it's just all this green grass here before, and which is great, but a lot of mowing, a lot of maintenance. And so then transforming it into this, which is the native prairie planting. So this is the back of my house here. There's that pool again, right here in the corner. And so not all native plants are created equal. I do want to mention this. I stole this from Doug Ptolemy. So those that know who Doug Ptolemy is, he is a really wonderful advocate for not just native plants, but that movement to really convert our backyards and really look at them as part of the ecosystem and not separate, and not be trying to fight against nature all the time, that we can live in harmony with nature and we can consider our neighborhoods and our yards just like we do our national parks and our natural areas that we go to visit. So keystone species are what he likes to focus on. And a couple of the keystone species that I wanted to mention, and I'll talk a little bit more about, are oaks and goldenrods and asters. These are some heavy hitter pollinator plants. So these, when there have been studies that show that the majority of the pollinator insects, and not even just pollinator insects, but insects in general, use these species either as a place to find food or a place that they complete part of their life cycle. And then birds also use these trees for food sources. And then these trees have been shown to capture carbon better, help with erosion, help heal the soil as well. So I wanted to share this, and this is directly from his presentation. And the cool thing about this is at the end of the slide here, there's a link to this presentation and you can watch the whole thing. It's about an hour long, hour and a half. And Doug will go on and talk to you about this native plant finder, that you can find the native heavy hitter plants for your own area, the area in which you live, and just get some more information about why planting for pollinators is beneficial. So I wanted to share that real quick. And speaking of oaks, who wouldn't just like to lay in their yard and look up and see this? Like, come on, if there was no other benefit to planting for pollinators, just the aesthetics alone, to being able to enjoy this in your yard versus just seeing that sterile green landscape that we did in that earlier picture. This just says it all for me, this beautiful bur oak here. I want to touch on a couple plants in particular that are heavy hitters for pollinators, but then also provide that aesthetic and kind of year-round interest on your property so that you can start adding some of these. Super easy to find. This is wild strawberry. Make sure, you know, this is different than the garden variety strawberry that you would plant. This is our native strawberry. But this is something very easy to grow. It likes sun, it likes wet. But it can also sometimes grow in shade, and also sometimes it can grow in dry conditions. So it's pretty versatile. It's a great ground cover, but it's an early flowering pollinator plant. That's really a good heavy hitter here. So that's a good one to add to your property if you can. Just keep in mind that it does spread. So anywhere you put it, just make sure you have some room for it to spread and grow. This is a great replacement for that Bradford pear that I mentioned in the beginning with the white flowers. This is called serviceberry. So this is what it looks like in the spring. And then it gets the pretty red foliage in the fall. So it's a great interest plant. It's not one of those heavy hitter keystone species, but it has a lot of really great benefits to pollinators throughout the year. You know, our milkweeds are super important for pollinators. Notice they weren't one of those heavy hitters on the list because they are very specific to certain kinds of insects. They don't have a broad range, but they are very important to the insects that use them. For example, the monarch butterfly on the milkweed here. Obviously, this is the host plant for the monarch butterfly, so that's really important. So you can, common milkweed is something that can grow, oh my goodness, almost anywhere, and it just grows. It's really successful most places. So if you're somebody that would consider yourself having like a black thumb, common milkweed's an easy one to grow. Butterfly weed's a little more finicky, but it doesn't get quite as big and it doesn't spread as much if you're looking for a little more control. This is goldenrod, so showy goldenrod, but there's a lot of different kinds of goldenrod, but you can see this is a heavy hitter pollinator, a keystone species plant. So any of the goldenrods. So I personally love Riddell's goldenrod. That's my favorite one, but there's a lot of different kinds. The ones that you see most often are called Canada goldenrod. And those are native plants, but they can be aggressive and kind of prolific in some habitats. So you just have to watch that, or else it sometimes can take over. So just be careful with Canada goldenrod. These are two of my really favorite plants. If you're looking to, if you like dill plants, this is a great alternative to dill. This is the one on the left here is called Golden Alexander. It's the native host plant to swallowtail butterflies, but we know that swallowtails will also land on dill and lay their eggs on dill too, but I just love how they look so similar. But Golden Alexander is the Michigan native, so be looking out for that one if you are someone that appreciates the look of a dill plant. Wild geranium I love because it flowers really early. So if you're, a lot of times with native plants, they take a while to get going. So if you look back in my backyard right now, you don't see a whole lot of color because things aren't getting going yet. But the wild geraniums flower fairly early in the season. So you get that beautiful purple flower this time of year actually is when it's flowering. I love sneezeweed. I know the name sounds bad. But helenium is great because like a deer can come up and eat the entire plant, even though it's supposed to be like deer resistant, but deer don't care. They don't read the directions and they'll just eat it if they want it. It can like mow down the entire thing and it'll just grow right back. It's awesome. So this is a heavy hitter plant for sure. In addition to those wild sunflowers like helianthus, very similar to like a sunflower looking plant. So someone asked me in another presentation if butterfly bush was considered native and that they should plant it. Do not plant butterfly bush. It's not a beneficial pollinator plant, even though butterflies sometimes will go to it. There's a lot of better alternatives of native plants that you should be planting. So butterfly bush is something that sometimes you see at nurseries, but try to avoid that. This is a good alternative if you like those big purple flowers. This is Baptisia wild indigo. There's a native version here down at the bottom and on the right, but there's other cultivars that are nice for that color and have more benefits than the butterfly bush. And then don't forget your grasses. So if you like those ornamental grasses, like some landscapers put in, make sure you're doing the native one. So big blue stem is beautiful. It's also called turkey foot grass because the seed heads kind of look like a turkey foot. So that's a good option. And then this is my favorite for shady areas. This is called bottle brush grass because it looks like a bottle brush that you'd clean a baby bottle out with. But it's just really a dynamic looking plant. It just kind of looks really cool and it can grow in those more shady areas. And then I love fragrant sumac because the leaves have a really great citrus flavor. It can fill beds for you. It's really controllable. It's kind of like that alternative to like a boxwood. If you like a shrub that you can kind of shape and make it fit into an area, I like fragrant sumac for that a lot. So if you're excited to tear out all your boxwood bushes or your yew bushes, this is a good alternative. So here's those resources. I just wanted to mention a couple of them specifically. The Xerces Society is focused on butterflies, but they have really great resources when it comes to data-backed information. So if you're wanting all the data on why these things are important, they have great information for you. Michigan Native Plant Producers up at the top, Wild Type and Michigan Wildflower Farm are the two that I use the most for my native plants. So those are a couple good resources. And then on this page was that complete guide to growing perennials in containers. That has a lot of great tips for overwintering perennials in containers, because that's, I feel like, the hardest part. And then Doug Ptolemy, Nature's Best Hope, is one of his books, but he's got multiple books. But this is a link to that presentation that I would highly recommend. Just sit back and watching one night when you have time. Tons of information for you. And then if you're active on social media, I would look into different groups, but the Pollinator Friendly Yards Facebook group is really great. A lot of resources there, a lot of information, simple things that you can do to make your yard more friendly to pollinators, for sure. And why it's so important to me in particular, and this is my little one that just came in the room a minute ago, but these are my kiddos. So what you can see here is this is my native backyard, but you probably didn't notice in the picture is there's this little hidden hollow in the corner that we're slowly working on. We're making like a mud kitchen and all kinds of crazy stuff. They got their pirate flag back there. But a couple of things to notice in this picture is the green grass over here is my neighbors. So, they're embracing the turf grass, but we're over here with our pirate flag and our mud pies and having a good old time. And then I want to make sure that things continue to, that we're able to walk through a creek in our bare feet, and have these native plants growing on either side of a creek like that for the next generation, so that my kids can continue to enjoy nature in this way. So even if it's for nothing else, doing it for the next generation is so important, because we're not going to be able to continue on the path that we're on. So here is my contact information. If you have questions, you can always email me, or this is the number at the Nature Center. We're always happy to answer questions about pollinator yard projects or native plants or plants that deer don't want to eat. We have a whole list of those if you need tips, so you can always give us a call. And then hopefully, I'm not sure if I have time for questions, but I'm happy to answer any questions that folks have.
You sure do have time. We have time for questions. Garrett, shall we have people unmute themselves, put their hand up first, right?
Yeah, like if you can, I guess it depends on the, either like put it in the chat. If you can put your hand up and we see you, please do. But, I'm looking at my view. I might not be able to see anybody. So if your hand's up and no one's calling on you, please go ahead and just, you can take yourself off mute and ask the question. But I'll also note, just in terms of some of the comments that people were putting in the chat while you were talking, Ashlie, definitely when you started talking about, the benefit of turn off the lights, a number of folks were chiming in about just reinforcing that point, talking about turning off the lights in their neighborhood. You had mentioned something about talking to your like the neighborhood group or the management, like in your like if in your condo area, and Phil used a different term of like talking to the neighborhood group. He said he threatened the management of the townhouses to turn off the night lights.
I always start with like, they use like, killing them with kindness first, like being really sweet and nice. And then, then you just go to the threats, like stop using the lights.
And then there is a question here though about, actually Monica asks a question about tall grass and does it attract rats?
So the rat question, that's a great question. The tall grass and the tall plants like that doesn't necessarily attract rats. Rats are attracted to those areas where they can create, so for example, an area that has a lot of like down debris and shrubs. So think about like kind of a messy like brush pile. They could be attracted to that. So as long as you're making sure that those areas are cleaned up. And then also if you feed wildlife, so if you feed birds and things, rats can't differentiate between bird seed for the birds and it's a treat for them. So I used to live in Ferndale. And so Ferndale is like rat central for anyone that lives in that area. And unfortunately I could not feed the birds in Ferndale because of the rat problem. However, I did convert about maybe like 20 to 30% of my yard there before I moved out into native plant habitat. And I really didn't have rat activity in that area. It was more in like by the bird feeders and near fence lines and decks and things, and my neighbor's property where they had like brush piles and things, not in the wildflowers. So not to say that rats wouldn't go there at all, but it's not necessarily going to like attract it more.
Karen asked about the slides being available. She said, great presentation.
Oh
So
yeah.
I think you said the link, maybe you're going to drop a link in there.
Let me.
Cool. Well, while you're doing that, Rose said she loves your kids' hideout.
Oh yeah.
For the pirate flag.
Their pirate flag. I know.
Jolly
They love their
Rockers
hideout
crew.
too. I'm working on it. I got to make it we keep adding, like I was talking earlier, little bit by little bit, like I have this grand vision for their hideout and I just keep adding little bits at a time to it when I have time. So, okay. So I added the link there to the Google Drive. So you guys should be able to see the slides. And then when you get to those resource pages, you can just click on those links and get more information.
Awesome. Monica asks, how would you transition your lawn to the slow growing kind?
Yeah, so I think now it depends on the type of turf that you have already. So if like you have a yard like mine, I don't really have a lot of the non-native, weed-free, super green carpet grass. Like it wouldn't be too hard for me to convert it. But if you have a pretty thick turf already, you may need to use that solarization method and kill that turf grass that's already there, and then reseed it with the EcoTurf seed mix that I mentioned. That's that slow growing seed mix. So you may need to kind of get, my yard, when I first converted into my native kind of, I call it my backyard prairie, it looked rough like the first year, like it was all dead. And my neighbors were like, what are you doing? Your yard's half dead. And I'm like, don't worry, like it's going to look really great in like 6 months, I promise. So you do have to go through like a little bit of an ugly phase, in order to reap that reward, but it's totally worth it. So.
Thanks for that. Patricia asked, she asked the name of the goldenrod that you recommend. And she said specifically not Canada. But
it's the Riddells. I'll type it in the chat because the name is kind of a weird. I think it's 2Ds. Let me see my spell it. Yeah, I think 2Ds. Riddells is my favorite. It does well in a lot of different conditions and it doesn't like take over. But there's also stiff leaf goldenrod, showy goldenrod, grass leaf goldenrod. There's a lot of different kinds, but the Canada goldenrod is the one that's just can kind of take over. And then in addition to the goldenrod, which I didn't really talk about, the asters are wonderful too. So any kind of aster, and that's going to be a fall, typically not always, but like midsummer to fall flowering plant. That's nice because it adds that pop color when you have less things flowering late in the season.
Monica was asking, mentioning that it seems like native plants are hard to find, and asking if you have tips on where to buy them.
So every once in a while, you might get lucky at like your native plant nursery. You just have to be mindful of not the common name, but like the genus, like the genus and the scientific name at the end. Like, so read that scientific name, the Latin name, and make sure that the big red flags you want to look for is if it's like, for example, if it's like goldenrod or coneflower, and it's like, I don't know, I can't even think of an example right now, but like pretty pink coneflower, like grapefruit purple, like some weird like name in there. It's usually a cultivar. So try to stay away from those, because pollinators also stay away from those. So if you want to attract pollinators, those aren't the best. And so pay attention to the scientific name, but also using that Michigan Native Plant Producers website is helpful. Wild Type actually nursery, it's a little ways out in Mason, Michigan, but they are having retail days coming up here in the next like 2 weeks that you can sign up for and go and just shop. They typically are like a wholesale place where you have to order your stuff in advance and like go pick it up kind of in bulk. But they are having retail days. And then Friends of the Rouge also has wonderful native plants that they sell at their Rouge store. They sell you like a kit, like you can get like a whole, like, here's my butterfly garden kit, or here's my rain garden kit. And it's got a bunch of different species in like a flat. And early on in the season, they were like shipping them right to your door. I think now they're doing them more as like a pickup, but that's a great resource too. Friends of the Rouge, Wild Type, Michigan Wildflower Farm for seed. And then I just heard of another nursery, Willow Nursery, I think out in Novi. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that one. It's Willow something nursery. But I heard that they have a good collection of Michigan natives. You could try there. That's a little closer to like Southeast Michigan for native.
You heard of Prairie Nursery? Rose Burke put that in there as a suggestion, trying Prairie Nursery.
Where's that? I don't know where that one's at. Do you know where it's at?
Maybe Rose, you can type that in. If you got a little more detail, you can share with us.
Yeah, anytime you can find. I know that there's some that I used to use a lot that slowly over time they just kind of went by the wayside. American Roots used to be my favorite, and she kind of didn't close up shop, but she's not really selling retail plants anymore. Yeah, Friends of the Rouge, somebody put that in there. Yeah.
Can you remind us where you can get eco turf grass, William, or some
that was a specific seed mix from Michigan Wildflower Farm. So if you just Google Michigan Wildflower Farm, their website comes up, and they have great their seed mixes are, let's say you click on the prairie seed mix or whatever, and it'll show you exactly what's in it, like the percentage of these seeds that are in it. And then that way you can make sure that it's specific to your site. You know, if you have an area that's more shady. And then another great thing that any master gardener will tell you, and the master gardener link was on there too, is to test your soil. Sometimes it's helpful to decide what kind of plants should grow there. So collecting a soil sample and sending it out to MSU Extension, they can help tell you what type of soil you have is also helpful when planning out your native planting. And then the native planting and what were we talking about? The nursery, can't remember what she was asking. Oh, the eco turf grass. So that's a great spot to find the seed. Another thing to notice when you're looking at the seed is the cover crop that's in it. So Michigan Wildflower Farm, I think in almost all of their seed mixes has at least 20% cover crop. And that would be like wild rye or something like that. And that's important if you are doing something like I did, where you killed your entire turf grass and you were trying to get natives established. Sometimes natives can take up to 2 or 3 years to even germinate. And in that time, we know that there's weeds like thistle, like non-native invasive Canada thistle or creeping Charlie, or those kinds of typical lawn weeds that can come. When I say weed, I'm referring to like an invasive plant that can establish themselves in that time. So that cover crop really helps to keep the weeds down. And so you can get, like, if you're going to do a clean slate kind of planting, sometimes getting extra cover crop, a higher percentage, is helpful if you want to keep the weeds down. Like on my property, I wished I would have gone with a higher percentage of cover crop because I am starting to get some thistle issues and things that I'm trying to battle.
Good tips. Catherine also mentioned in terms of like sourcing native plants, Cranbrook Gardens and their plant sale as well.
Mhm. So some of the metro parks and counties will also, and other nature centers will also do plant sales. So be on the lookout, like more hyper local things too. So the things that I gave are just very broad, like anybody from anywhere can just go there and get those. But like I know Oakland County or some of the nature centers, for example, the Troy Nature Center, they do at least once a year a plant sale. Heritage Park, where I work in Farmington Hills, they have a plant swap. So it's not necessarily a sale, but you can trade plants and things like that. I think it's in a couple weeks on May 22nd. So be on the lookout for those kinds of things in your local community, because your county or your natural areas a lot of times will host native plant sales that you can check out.
What about that poster, the Celebrating Wildflowers Ethnobotany poster?
Yeah, I saw that question. I'm trying to remember.
Okay.
That is a poster that you can buy. You can buy it. And I'm just trying to remember if I included that site on the resources or not. Don't know if I did. Let me wonder if I can go back to that slide. Fly back to it. It might say on the, it was way back at the beginning, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. That was an adorable hummingbird.
Keep going. It's like oh, here.
There we go.
Okay, I'm trying to see down at the bottom here because it says, so it's US Forest Service. Down at the bottom. So yeah, you can purchase it. And I think, and then the US Fish and Wildlife. So it was like a partnership between these organizations down in the corners. But I think you could just search the Celebrating Wildflowers poster or ethnobotany poster, and you would find it.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So another suggestion of a plant sale. Washtenaw Water Council has a plant sale. And then a question from Monica: is it okay to plant native plants throughout the summer, or does it basically depend on the type? Talk about her front lawn starts to really dry out in the summer.
Yeah, so I've planted native plants at times when it wasn't a good time to plant native plants, because it's maybe a like volunteer day or something scheduled at the nature center, and it's really the only time that I'm going to have any help to do a planting. So regardless of like the type of weather we're having, it's like that's when we're planting the plants, so it's happening. So you just have to be careful if you do that if it's if you're hitting a dry spell, or if it's really hot. These plants don't require watering once they've become established, but if you're putting plugs in and it's going to be, if you know we're hitting a dry spell, or if it's going to be really hot, you do need to water them regularly to make sure that they, become established and don't, croak because of lack of water or it's too hot. So ideally you would want to do things in the spring and the fall. Those are the ideal times to plant native plants, but I've planted native plants like in early July, which is terrible, but I've done it and they've been okay. So you just have to give them a little extra TLC.
Oh,
Trying to see if there's any.
someone making an announcement. Karen said, Justin from Rochester Garden Club. There's going to be a walk June 17, plus a native plant sale.
Fun.
And a fleetique, gently used gardening items. Details will be posted in the next couple of weeks. I know, it's like lots of things all in one day. Details will be posted in the next.
Some of these plant sales too are, especially with the pandemic, but I think they'll probably keep it up, are doing like pre-orders where you can go on and fill out like a pre-order form of the plants that you want and then just go and pick them up, which is really nice. Cause then you know what you can plan for what you're going to get, versus like me, sometimes I'll go to those native plant sales and be like, oh, I could use a couple more wild strawberry, and just like, grab them and not even really know where I'm putting them. So it's good to be able to plan ahead if you can, especially if you're trying to fill in a big area or something. So then that way you have, even if you do a really simple, just little drawing of like, this is my area and these are the plants I'm hoping for. I've done those before. And then even if you can't find the plant that you're hoping for, to possibly have like an alternative in your mind of like what else could go there. Cause I've done that before where I've had very specific plants laid out and then I can't find like half of them. So to have like a plan B, especially when you're looking out there hunting for native plants at these plant sales and stuff like that, you kind of have a plan B in mind of what you can use.
There's a link in there in the chat for folks that are interested about the Rochester Garden Club, their Facebook page.
Cool.
Getting some props from Monica about the presentation, Ashlie.
Oh, thanks, Monica. I saw I think it was Monica that said, or somebody said earlier that they feel like their city would just come and mow down their no mow zone or whatever. So depending on where you live, you know, sometimes you need to get what's called like a weed variance or, you know, something from your city in order to, and it depends on your property too. Like mine, I'm lucky it's like in my backyard and that's actually considered like the commons area, like of our subdivision. So it's more of like just an HOA thing. But sometimes if you're trying to establish a no-mow zone or native wildflowers and grasses, even if it's not formal permission from the city, but sometimes it's helpful to seek those variances or special permits depending on where you live, to have that. Because as much as we know what we're doing is good and we're doing it intentionally, sometimes our neighbors or like the city might not realize that we're not just letting our yards go. So sometimes that's something you have to do, you know, to make sure that they don't come and mow your stuff down. And it's also really important to talk to your neighbors too, you know, just good old fashioned, hey, this is what's happening at my house. Like when I killed my whole backyard, my neighbors thought I was crazy. Just explaining like what you're doing, because, you know, just that can go a long way to make sure you don't have any problems down the road.
Just let them know that the pirate flag in the backyard is just your kids.
I know that area is kind of hidden. Like it is really hidden. You don't really see it. So it's really cool. They have like a secret entrance. Like that picture I showed you is more of the spring. So it's a little more open, but when everything leaves out, it's like a little hidden hollow back there. It's cool.
It's going to live in their imagination and memory for a long time.
I hope so.
Yeah. Oh, Dave Cottrell asks, would buffalo grass work well in Michigan?
So I was just recently hearing some stuff about buffalo grass and I'm trying to remember what was said. I always gravitate towards the prairie grasses that like the keystone prairie grasses, like big blue stem, little blue stem, prairie dropseed, Indian grass, switchgrass. Like those are always my go-tos. And then there's some great sedges. There's fox sedge, brown sedge. Like there's some really good sedges that are low growing that are great to plant. I'm not sure. I'd have to go look to see what's in that seed mix from that EcoTurf mix at Michigan Wildflower Farm, because I know that there are some not technically Michigan natives in there, but so I'm wondering if anybody is currently like trying to convert their yard or add in more natives or trying to do any of this stuff currently to their yards, what kinds of things that they're experiencing, or if anyone wanted to share. Maybe if anyone, you know, if you have any other questions that you're thinking of, there was one more poll that we didn't do, Jerry, our pollster. And basically that was just how you're going to be part of the solution. So we went over a lot of different options for you. And even if you just pick one thing, you're helping out a little bit. Or if you want to do all the things, like that's great too. But just remember, like start a little bit at a time. And even if it's just converting your yard, just little bits by little bits, it makes a huge difference. So don't feel overwhelmed by the task. And just maybe choose a few things you want to focus on, or one thing you want to focus on this year, you know, to really help out our pollinators and the native ecosystem. I'm just selecting what I want to do. hopefully that'll help you make a plan after this presentation and take some action. Because I always know when I come to these Zoom meetings and things, I'm always like wanting things that I can take away right away and start putting into practice. So
And we've
hopefully I
got,
gave you all some things to do. What'd you say?
We've got 12 of 20 so far. Anybody else?
Oh.
15? We'll wait a few more seconds here.
I see Dave's comment about he's got a mixture of grass, weeds, and clover that rabbits like to eat. I want to know what the magic mix is to get more rabbits. I love rabbits coming to my yard.
So here's our results.
So I'm glad that people want to do more research, because I think that's good. I mean, in our presentation on trying to tell you all the ways that you can help pollinators, I flew through a lot of things really fast. So definitely go do some more digging and find out what's going to work best for you. But planting native trees and flowers looks like it's the front winner at the moment. So yay, good job.
Does anybody, any more stories from the field or from people's yards that they want to share about what's going on, or other questions for Ashlie?
So if you haven't been to Heritage Park in Farmington Hills, normally I would always start a talk with like, who's been to Heritage Park? But it's hard to do that on Zoom and be like, hello, I have. If you haven't been there, definitely come visit me, and you can see a lot of these things in action. A few of our gardens in different phases. Things are always a work in progress. And I've always heard from a few experienced gardeners that you don't truly know a plant until you kill it 4 times. So it's okay to, you know, have failures and learn from those things, and nothing's perfect. So you can see all that in action at Heritage Park if you want to come out and check it out. So come visit.
Thank you so much, Ashlie. Really appreciate
guys.
all this information. Thanks for sharing. Also, like putting the link in to share the presentation so that we can go back and access all this. It's awesome.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you, Ashlie. Bye, everyone.
Yeah, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, see you later.
We'll see you next month. Hey, Ashlie, I got a question for you. Farmington Hills related.
Okay.
Would you, at the Nature Center, would you all be interested in any like taxidermied specimens of animals? I mean,
Yeah.
like mounts or pelts or things like that?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Well, that's where we
okay,
get
good.
most of the taxidermied items we have at the Nature Center currently were just donated things. So
Okay.
yeah, that's great.
All
Why
right.
do you
It
have
was
some
just
taxidermy?
yeah, not me. I used to have
Oh.
like 2 ducks when I met my wife, and they were from my grandmother's boyfriend, and she's like, we're not gonna have dead ducks in our house. So I lost my dead ducks about 15 years ago. But I just ran into somebody who has a number of items from her family. She wants to find a good home from them. Loves the idea of them being in a place where, like, you know, kids and people can learn about the animals. So, you know, like
Yeah, that
a
would
place
be great.
that
A lot of
respects the
our
legacy.
Yeah, that would be awesome, because a lot of the things that people donate, we try to be good about like putting up like a tag, like donated by, and like their name, so that it's kind of something they can come back. We have a lot of items like that families will come back and be like, hey, those are our geese up there.
Yeah,
Random things.
yeah.
So
Okay, cool. And is it okay if I just share your contact information at work with this person, if they can, so they can
yeah,
just reach out
if
to
they
you and
have
let you know sort of
yeah,
what
if they have
to offer?
items, they can just
Okay.
reach out.
Okay, all right, that's what I'll do. Perfect.
Cool, thanks.
Thank you. All right. Well, it's good seeing you all, and if we don't see you in person before our next meeting, we'll see you back here, same Zoom place, same Zoom time.
Okay, see everybody.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks again.